Hey, welcome to another Automation Ladies Live. This time, a panel discussion with two of us and two guests, as you can see. We are joined today by Joe Campbell and Jennifer Mass, who are going to talk to us about trade shows, trade show exhibiting, trade show etiquette, training. And I will say that this is really, should be a very valuable discussion for you guys, especially if you exhibit at trade shows, because these folks do a lot of consulting and have illustrious careers in working in marketing in our industry and have run a lot of trade show booths in their past, as well as now work with a lot of different clients, train and consult with their marketing and sales folks about how to make the most of their trade show experiences. And so I think that this is a very exciting topic for me to talk about. I think that it's fun because I go to a lot of shows now. I've also been an exhibitor. I'm going to be an exhibitor more often this year. But what baffles me, and the story that I was telling Joe and Jennifer backstage before we started, is I went to my first trade show when I was in college, and I saw the people in front of me sitting in their booth, either staring at their computers or talking to each other, and hardly anybody visited them or wanted to talk to them. And I just did not understand why they would do that. And I saw a picture on LinkedIn where this discussion kind of kicked off I guess a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly.
At a show this year, I believe, or maybe last year, but recently, where, the company name was kind of, the identifying information was blurred out, but there were 3 employees staring at their phones, sitting in a booth at a trade show. And the fact that that is still happening 20 years later baffles me. I don't know why companies invest in taking their equipment, their machinery, and then you're going to sit there and just not try to make the most of it. It's never made sense to me. I have this motto, like, if you're going to do it, do all of it, go big or go home. So I'm never the exhibitor that packs up early. I find it to be disrespectful to the show organizers, as well as any potential, people that are still around, because the show hasn't closed. So anyway, I'm going to try to stay off my soapbox for most of this episode and let our esteemed guests give you their tips and tricks and the things that they learned. But I hope that you find this an interesting topic, whether you're an attendee or an exhibitor or a marketer of trade shows. Please let us know. Let us know if you've joined us. Say hi, where you're joining us from, and how you get involved with shows. Maybe what shows you're planning on going to this year. And and then I want to also thank Automate, who is sponsoring this show and every show leading up to Automate, which is coming up May 12th through 15th in Detroit. And I'm going to be there for my first time this year as an exhibitor with WinTech. We are in the 6,700 something booth number. Look us up under W in the directory and you will find us. So, hey, Courtney, thanks for joining us. I'm glad you're here. How are you?
I'm good. I was just thinking that I've committed that so many times where I go onto a show and I'm like, oh, I should have known my booth number when I got on here.
I've kind of just embraced it. I'm like, you know what? If I keep saying it, people still won't remember. I don't think people are writing down and
We're still far enough out. Don't worry.
I figured the easiest way to get people to remember to look us up is to try to remember our name, WinTech, WinTech, WEINTEK, right?
However you choose to say it.
However you choose to say it. And the fact that I think that's where you're going to be looking at where you're going to go when you get to the show.
You would hope. Absolutely.
Yeah, you would hope. So Joe Campbell, welcome to Automation Ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I am very glad to be here. I also want to take off on one point that you already made, and it's something that I've had a lot of fun doing when I do consulting or training, and that is to ask the crowd, how much does it cost to operate this given trade show, whether it's IMTS or Automate or whatever, per hour over the course of 4 days for Automate. And I will tell you, and Jennifer, I know you've seen this because you've put budgets together. Even without travel and entertainment, the number is staggering. Mm-hmm. Not uncommon to see a $20,000 to $22,000 to $23,000 per hour cost to run a trade show.
Wow.
And what I find is there's a lot of people that go to trade shows and they think it's a lot of fun, it's exciting, we get to talk to customers, we're out all night, we get to do new stuff, but they're not really appreciating the investment from the company. And that's the conversation that people like Jennifer and I have with the CEO, who says, tell me again why I'm putting a couple $100,000 into this show and what are we going to do?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Joe. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars go into being at the trade show, excluding travel, excluding food, excluding all the entertainment after the show. And it's amazing to me how many people just think, oh, this is so easy. We just need to show up and just be here. And that is not how it works. There's a lot of training that needs to happen. There's a lot of polishing, whether it's on people, whether it's on your demos, making sure the booth is set up properly and everyone knows the orientation of the booth that's going to be at the show or going to be representing the company at the show. There's so much that goes into being at these trade shows, whether they're 2 days or even 7 days.
Yeah, 7 days. I think IMTS was crazy. I have never been to a
IMTS is
show
always
that long.
so long.
It's brutal.
It's just rough
Yes.
for being long. Yeah.
And this was the first time this year that I needed to be there the entire time. I've only walked that show before. And for shows that big, you typically pick like 2 days that you go, maybe if you're an attendee.
Yeah.
From an exhibitor standpoint, going there from Sunday to Saturday. And I know in some cases it's longer for people that come in to set up big booths ahead of time.
Yep.
Although Courtney, the reason I really wanted to include Courtney on this panel is more so, from her perspective, because she's been an applications kind of engineer setting up booth demos before many times. And that's a perspective that I also never had of how you have to show up really early, all of the blood, sweat, and tears, and oh my God, is the demo going to be ready by the time the show floor opens? Energy that happens behind the scenes because there's a whole host of cost, extra days, right? That goes into that even before you have salespeople, in the booth sitting there ready to talk to customers.
I can also say you can almost always tell a first-time exhibitor because they make assumptions about what they're going to be able to get done on the show floor.
Yeah.
So, for example, they come, they need compressed air, but they don't have any fittings. Okay, well that just cost you half a day minimum, right? Or they come and they don't have a selection of connectors, electrical connectors, or they plan to have to bolt 5 different demos to the show floor. I mean, that's $500 to $7,500 right out of the pocket right there. And you can always tell the newbies because they're going, what do you mean? What do I have to do again? And unfortunately, it falls on people like Courtney who are doing the setup. It's dark in the hall. There's nobody there. And they're trying to figure out how to get the demos to work.
Doing surgery.
Yeah, my favorite is also if you have a European machine and you're in the US.
Oh, yes.
We discussed this. What do you mean you don't have the correct adapters? What do you mean you don't have the US converters? Like we've discussed
it goes back and forth. Like, why did you ship it with that connector? And then they're looking at you going, why you knew where it was coming from? Why don't you have the universal adapters?
Yeah.
What about when have you seen booths that are sold but nobody's there? Like they just last minute decided not to come, or maybe their stuff didn't make it there. I don't know. That's always baffled me. Does anybody know anybody that's happened to? Like they all of a sudden just aren't there and the booth space is just empty?
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's painful.
It happens. I mean, the convention does not want that to happen, so they do their very best to accommodate. But I have talked to individuals from organizations, and they're like, yep, so-and-so pulled out at the last minute. They're never coming back again. And that is the culprit. Like if you decide to not show up for whatever reason, you will never be invited back again.
Yeah. Or at best, you're going to go on the very, 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 very bottom of the list.
Yeah.
And it'll
You're going to
take
get the corner space over by the bathrooms next time.
Yeah, it'll take you 10 years to get back to where you were.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we saw more of that during, COVID or back in 2008 with the Great Recession.
Yeah.
Although you still see it today. Every show we go to, we'll find a booth or 2 or 3 that's just dead empty.
I guess, you can budget and pay for the deposit for the booth, but then, maybe something goes wrong. Or I wonder if it's ever, they didn't really plan on the full cost, but it may be a combination of the two. Because I'm guessing some, like you said, some new companies, they really have no idea of all the extra costs involved. No. And it's not like the show organizers make it abundantly clear that you're going to have to spend thousands of dollars on freight and you're going to have to spend hundreds to thousands of dollars on internet. and hundreds to thousands of dollars on carpet and hundreds to thousands of dollars on
On
Yeah,
travel.
just have the
and
square
I mean, you name
footage
it,
alone is huge.
Jennifer
And then that's
will
not even the
appreciate
floor
this.
and everything.
No, what the other question I'd love to hear is, what's drayage?
Yeah.
What is that?
What is
I said
drayage?
it's a big bucket of money is what it is.
Yeah, isn't that part of my logistics company? No.
No.
Doesn't my logistics company take care of that? No.
So for those of you who don't know, drayage is the fee that the show hall charges the exhibitors to not to ship to the dock, but to get from the dock to the booth location, from the booth location back to the dock. And when you look at the numbers, it's staggering, but that's a big source of their income, and you better budget for it or you're going to be painfully surprised.
Yes, especially if you have a very large machine, very heavy machine that requires forklifts or more than one forklift. If you have something, you're going to pay a lot of money for drayage.
Yeah.
So I'd love to ask both of you, what is your best suggestion for a new or small company that is maybe inexperienced with exhibiting at big trade shows, how they would go about being realistic about being their budget, what their budget should be, and how they should be thinking about their investment into the show? Do you have any, I guess, suggestions for resources, how they could plan that budget, if there's any information out there somewhere that you know of that can make this easier to deal with? If they don't have the option, although of course I would say consult with someone like you guys.
Right here, we've been doing it for
Yeah,
years,
I know.
so-
But I bet both of you are also very generous with some of the resources you can provide to people that are trying to consider whether they should hire you, or maybe they're not ready or can't, or for whatever reason, right? So aside from hire me, what suggestions do you have for people of how to evaluate whether they should really go to a trade show, and just with the real kind of numbers in mind?
I mean,
Well, I would say to reach out directly to the show services individuals from the organization. They'll be able to help you. I mean, maybe not walk you hand in hand as far as creating your budget, but they can at least give you some numbers. And then whatever budget number you come up with, know that you're not going to spend that completely. You want to leave yourself a minimum of 10 to 15% cushion room, because there is something that always goes wrong. And you don't want to stress out about going over budget when you're on site and you have to purchase or rent a table all of a sudden because yours has been destroyed in shipping. Or, oops, you accidentally forgot to get flooring. So now you have to have flooring because that is a necessity. You cannot have a booth without flooring. And so, leaving yourself a little bit of cushion room is very important. But I would say really rely on other people too. If you have any company that you know that has already exhibited, ask them. I mean, they should be able to tell you what they spent. And that way you're kind of going off of knowledge from the organization and from previous exhibitors. And then from there, build your budget, but make sure you give yourself a cushion room.
Well, and I think there's two other pieces I'd throw into the mix is, I mean, we're marketing people, right? That's what we do. It's who we are. But the truth is, to put on a big trade show that's gonna spend $400,000 to $500,000. I mean, look at IMTS or Automate. There will be many companies that spend at that level. Truthfully, you need a project manager.
Yeah,
Because
that's really good point.
there's 250 balls in the air on any given hour, and when you drop a ball, as Jennifer said, you show up at the exhibit hall and you don't have carpet. You can get it for a premium. You can get a table for a premium. You can get signage for a premium. You can get anything you want.
You can rent TVs for a premium.
If you don't bring it, you're going to pay 2x.
Well, if you're lucky.
You're going to be back and forth to Best Buy, Walmart, Target, IKEA. That always seems to happen.
Actually, so one time we did run to Best Buy because the price to rent a TV for the show, because it wasn't just one TV, it was 4, but it was going to be astronomical. It made way more sense to buy TVs and abandon them than it would have to rent them. Like that's just how much it was.
I actually have one of those abandoned TVs in my office right now.
Yeah, I have an abandoned.
I happen to be driving home from this particular show, so I took it with me. But that's a reason why when we were in Nashville for Automation Ladies, we just bought some chairs at the local Walmart and we gave them away when we were done.
Right.
Because they're the hidden cost of sort of like shipping and dealing with all those things, if you bring them yourself, is one thing. But then, the rental rates for these things are just crazy, which I think, obviously makes sense in some cases to rent just for the convenience of not having to deal with getting it there and getting rid of it or whatever. But I think on the lower end, companies that
rent that stuff, it does not look good. It's been used so many times. It's not going to look new like what you're thinking.
That's a good point.
If you rent a table, make sure you have a tablecloth because it's going to look pretty raggedy.
Yeah.
And you're still going to pay a very high cost to get
I'm going to throw up a few comments here from our audience, and then I have another topic or question I want to get to. Hey, Patrick. Glad to see you here. Patrick is from Alabama. I just met him a few weeks ago when I was in town with Keith. We had some big bad breakfast together. And he showed up at the Assembly Show South, which was in Nashville, I believe, last week. We made it there last year, but we had too much travel on our plate this year to go. That's a fun show, particularly because of the location. It's a smaller show. It's co-located. So it's the Assembly Show, the Quality Show, and some sort of adhesives.
I don't know.
So I
think they throw a bunch of stuff in there.
Yeah. But I think that's growing. And, for the sort of a lot of the automotive manufacturing and things that are growing down there in the South, I'm doing better with my ahs and ums. Pauses are okay. I'm training myself to be a better speaker on air with you, audience. Thank you for your patience.
Good.
Michael Wida, hey, good to see you. Sorry, I think I say your last name wrong all the time. First time working a booth next week. Great timing. Okay, great. Yeah, we'll have some tips coming up for you that are unrelated to budgeting. So Michael is an engineer, controls engineer with Mast Owl Technologies.
Just be ready for closet time.
Feel free to DM Courtney, Michael, for any psychological advice on how to survive trade shows as an engineer in the booth.
Hurry up and wait. That's what you have to do. Hurry up and wait.
Daryl, thank you for joining us. He's in Michigan. I look forward to seeing you at Automate, Daryl. He has the real scoop on the WinTech booth number, 6732. Thank you, Daryl. My sales team should know this, so I'm glad they do. And Carrie Pierce. Hey, Carrie. She attended OT ScadarCon with us virtually last year, and I'm hoping to get her on the show sometime soon. She runs a really cool comic strip that she makes and shares. The extra fun part is all the engineering work that goes into making sure your demos are absolutely error-proof before the show. Worst thing ever is to have it fault out in the middle of showing it to a customer. Courtney, I think you can relate.
I felt that pain.
Yeah, Carrie has a booth at Automate this year, and I am excited to try to swing by to see it. And knowing that she put the demos together and stuff like that, I'm even that much more want to make sure that I get a chance to go over and show it. Carrie, if you're still around, tell us what you guys are going to be showing in the booth. Same thing with you, Michael, for your show next week. I don't know where it is and what you're going to be showing, but if you want to tell us, that would be cool. And Daryl, I don't know if you know any more than I do about what we're going to have in our booth at Automate this year, but obviously a lot of our HMI panels, our new web panel. And this year we're having a little bit more fun with robots. So there will be a UR cobot in our booth controlled by the WinTech HMI. And I think it has an Arduino PLC in the demo as well, who is our partner / neighbor. Their booth is right next to us as well.
Perfect.
Nice. Because I do think there's a draw to things moving around. Like some people, I think it's a trend. Just put a cobot in your booth to have something moving because customers like that, or people walking by.
Yeah,
it's a good icebreaker.
I think those days are going away.
It's not novel anymore. Yeah, but now it's more about, I think, all of the bigger cobot players are looking for enhanced ecosystems, right? How can we partner? How can we put these technologies together? Show the customer exactly what they might see as an end product versus just, here's a robot arm that you can program.
It's a transition to solution selling.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was commodity selling 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and now it's definitely moved towards solution selling.
So this is an unplanned question on my part, but Joe, obviously you come from that ecosystem. You've been in robotics for a really long time, and you have been with UR prior to your retirement. Right. So I bet, a lot of the trade show innovations and things that they've done were probably your idea or things that you led. What can you explain to us a little bit what you see as kind of the evolution of how those are being marketed at trade shows and what is successful today that maybe wasn't a few years ago?
Well, I mean, I think from the UR perspective, and I think it is the right strategy, it's to always have subject matter experts on the show floor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to do a welding demo, I mean, I know a little bit about welding. I could probably get a robot to weld. Am I a cobot welding subject matter expert? Not at all. And so for each of the application categories, we would always try to have a partner who would actually put the demo together. We had standards and we'd coach them and we'd help them. But I think it's important that you had somebody who could talk the talk. I like walking around the booth and going from this guy who's selling machine tool automation and he's talking to somebody who owns a machine shop. 20 feet down the booth, there's a welder talking to somebody who owns a weld shop.
Yeah.
And the language is completely different. And I think that's important. I think the other thing that I think, Jennifer, you're probably seeing it as well. Once you get out of the startup phase, the return on investment for a trade show investment becomes really critical.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in a startup phase, people just get buckets of money and start throwing it. But there's a point in time where you have to generate an ROI in the form of leads. And so I think you're nodding that you're probably in the same boat I am. I have a lot of conversations with CEOs, either pushing them to go smaller or pushing them to go bigger because of the potential, the attainable lead count coming out of a show.
Right.
There's nothing worse than going to a small regional show with a giant booth. Guaranteed you can't get a payback. However, if you had taken a 10-foot by 10-foot booth with a modest demo, it can be gold. And
Right.
I think that those are changes that are occurring throughout the industry right now.
Well, and I think to your point also, promotions need to also occur. So you need to send out emails, you need to push out social media, you need to let people know what your booth number is, when you're going to be there, and entice them to want to come see you. So explain to them what you're going to have in your booth. Is it going to be a product launch? Is it going to be a new demo? Like, what is it that is going to excite them and how is it going to benefit them? Because if you just say, hey, stop by our booth, we're going to be there. Okay, great. Why do I need to come see you? What are you going to do for me? What is it going to do and how am I going to benefit? Because at the end of the day, the company is exhibiting, they want to increase sales. So they want leads, but the people that are walking around, the attendees, they also have things that they have to accomplish, whether it's meeting with a certain company who can provide them a certain solution and or looking for a partner for their company. So there's always goals that each attendee has and each exhibitor has, but it's the exhibitors, it's a priority for the exhibitor to make sure that you are letting people know you're going to be there and why they need to see you.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I think you've probably seen the booth that is got 27 different products in it. And the attendees kind of glaze over. What am I looking at? And I think it's, you may have a crowded booth because you may have a broad product line, but have one major story for that show.
Right. Yeah, I've had so many arguments with people saying, we don't need to have a flea market. We don't need to have everything laid out. Like, I'm serious. Let's tone it down. Let's tone it down. And, I know, Mr. President, you want to show everything we offer, but we need to kind of tame it down a little bit. Let's narrow it down and figure out the top demos or the top products that you want to showcase or even discuss. And then we can bring brochures and magazines and other things of the sort that can show all the other products.
So I know the primary focus and function of trade shows is to get leads. What are your thoughts on is it quantity or quality, and how do you plan for it? Because I always wonder, does it help to have the trade show magician that brings half the floor to your corner and you scan them because they want to watch somebody juggle balls?
No.
Or do you
got every student on the floor to come?
Yeah.
Unless you have HR in your booth who's also hiring, I mean, you really, it's good to have the students, and it's good to promote, having students in your booth and seeing them. But honestly, quality is more important than quantity.
Yeah, I think there's a school of thought that kind of resurrected its head a couple years ago, and it basically said, we don't want quantity. All we want is orders.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't deliver me a lead that's going to turn into an order, then don't bother.
Right.
And I fought against that, because how many touches do you find before an order is placed?
Yeah.
It's 10, 12, 15.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2 trade shows, it's a podcast, it's a webinar, 3 white paper downloads, blah, 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 blah. You've touched them 12 times.
Right.
And if you just looked at the first visit to a trade show, when the question was, do you have a project that's ready to go to purchase? No. Well, they're out, and you lose them.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, my model has always been, make sure you get the MQLs, because they're going to be revenue in the next 3 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're automation professionals and they're in our space, I want to talk to them over the long haul.
Yeah.
Because their next project might be a year out, but I want to be first in line.
So MQL
is the existence of that nurturing status, right?
You're not really exactly.
Marketing quality leads, so qualified leads, and then goes to SQLs. Yeah.
So MQL stands for marketing qualified lead. SQL stands for sales qualified lead.
Correct.
I'm trying to do better on the show about just defining acronyms, even though I assume people know them, because there's a lot of people that kind of listen to us that are maybe adjacent to the specific niches we're discussing. And I find myself guilty of this, using common terminology that I use in my day job. So
it's probably also worth mentioning that I think, generally speaking, we see MQLs as like when marketing reaches out and tries to get like a more massive audience, versus the sales qualified lead, which is a more targeted, has already had a little bit of discussion and sales thinks there's a sale.
Yeah,
right.
It depends on how you run.
That's kind of new.
Run the funnel. It depends on how you run the funnel, right?
That's fair.
But yeah, that's.
But I've never. It's been only really the last 2 years that I've actually kind of started to get into like more the commercial side. Even though I started trying to like run my own company, I didn't understand marketing or how leads get qualified really until like the last couple of years, and paying attention to how bigger companies do it successfully. And like that's just kind of some stuff that I've noticed. But before even understanding what the acronym stood for, didn't really clarify for me like what's actually going on with a sales funnel. And I think engineers are probably curious about it, but we hear this stuff a lot, and I don't know how often we all kind of get involved in it.
Right. Yeah. And some of our audience, for sure, we have marketing folks that we know, but we also, a lot of our audience is engineers. And I think from our perspective, the reason that we kind of discuss all this different stuff, even though it's not just engineering related, like we're not a technical specific podcast, is because I think as a professional, the longer you're around an industry and the more you know about the roles and the adjacent things that go on around you, or like how your company makes money, why you have a paycheck, why you might get a raise this year or not, right? Why you might get bonuses. I think it's valuable in general to know as much as possible, to a limit, about what your coworkers and other departments and how your company runs, and why, why everybody gets fed at the end of the day. Because in our industry, it's not a given that the company sticks around either. We've seen that, even from companies that we might not expect, right? That have, and it is more so in the, maybe venture funded side of things, right? A lot of the established companies in our industry, they've been around for so long, they're profitable, they're not going away for any reason. But there are definitely, pitfalls to being in our industry. Machine builders, systems integrators come and go. Some of these new startups come and go, right? I think sometimes it's a surprise to staff or people that are not as close to the commercial side of the business when these things, don't work out well. So with that being said, I just wanted to say, like, if you're, in the engineering part of our audience, I hope you find it valuable to know some of this stuff. But Joe, from your perspective, you said there's a couple, there's different ways that you run your funnels. What would you consider to be kind of from maybe an OEM, or not OEM, this is always confusing. Are OEMs machine builders, or are OEMs the, robot manufacturers and the PLC manufacturers? But with our collective experience being more so from the component providers in the industry, selling to systems integrators and end users and OEMs, what is your kind of top way that you would suggest, Joe, that people think about the marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads that they should be expecting to get out of a trade show?
Well, I mean, first of all, I believe in putting a lot of time and energy into the framework of the conversation, right? Because you're talking to people when they come in the booth, but you're not in the parking lot of the Kroger supermarket with a clipboard, right? Checking off the survey.
Yeah.
You're going to have a conversation, and in that conversation, you're both going to discover whether there's a fit or not. My view was, and this is how I ran shows, which again, it may or may not be the right way for a given company or a given team. But what I wanted to do was establish some level of pain, some level of need, some level of timeline, and some level of budget. Mm-hmm. Right. And Jennifer, you have got to agree with this. If you ask an engineer what's your budget on the project, you will never, ever get a straight answer.
No.
Right. So you have to ask that question in a circular fashion. You have to benchmark it a couple different ways to get an idea of how big a problem it is. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you're talking about palletizing and the customer in your booth says, "Yeah, we've had 3 workers' comp claims in the last month." Okay, that's high priority. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a safety manager, there's a plant manager, there's a regional director of manufacturing who's going to be all over that, because you can't. That's expensive pain. Mm-hmm. Right. On the other hand, you get a young engineer who says those cobots are really cool. I think we ought to have one. Not so much. So my philosophy was identify those 4 main points, do it efficiently, and then move it on to sales, because at the end of the day, marketing is built to talk one to many. Mm-hmm. Right. Sales is built to talk one to one. Right. Mm-hmm. A good salesperson will get 10 times more information from a conversation one-on-one than I would, just because that's who they are and that's what they do for a living.
Right.
But other people have different models.
So do you suggest that, let's say a company, if they have a big enough booth and a big enough presence, that they have some marketing people or people kind of more qualifying the conversations and then pass them on to sales within right in the booth right now? Or do you mean more so later on, right? Sales will follow up with you.
Typically later on, I'll always try to do an introduction. Hi, Jennifer, I want you to meet Bobby. Bobby is your regional account manager. You guys should know each other, and Bobby will follow up after the show.
Yeah.
But now you've got eye to eye. You've made an introduction. I think one of the dangers we all see, especially in this industry, is the trade show engineer. It's the customer who shows up with a laptop bag full of CAD files. He's got
their part in the bag.
He's got parts. He's got bags of parts. He's got prints, and by God, he wants an answer before he leaves the booth.
Yeah.
But you can't do it.
No.
Right? You're going to tie up 2 engineers for an hour or 2 hours. And I'm of the opinion that you always set up a follow-up meeting. Can we meet for breakfast?
that trade show booth engineer will get with the other engineer, and they'll just keep talking for
hours. And then you have to separate them. Go find someone else for your trade show engineer to go speak with.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that happens quite a bit, especially when when the booth staff is not trained in how to actually conduct these conversations, right? If they kind of just go in and, hey, talk to people, you don't have a plan, you don't have a playbook. And I can see that happening quite a bit. Jennifer, when you prep your salespeople and your booth staff, what kind of composition do you typically see, and how do you, prep them so that they can be the most efficient with their time and try to produce the highest quality leads for following up on later, rather than just a bunch of scans or a few people taking up everybody's time in the booth over the whole time?
Yeah.
Well, first off, I would get my leadership team involved. And then I would also put together a presentation, whether it was in person. A lot of times it would be remote because the sales guys are all remote now. We would have a meeting a week before the actual trade show started. That way it's fresh in their mind. Normally too, I would have to leave a week early. So it would be right before I left. And then we would have that meeting. And then that way it would have the exact layout of the trade show booth. It would have their attire, what they're supposed to wear, so that they don't show up wearing, gray pants and they're supposed to be wearing khaki pants or vice versa. You want everybody to be polished. You want everybody to be in the know. It would have their hotel location, how to get to the convention center, every nitty gritty detail. I would put that into a presentation. I would have a presentation with my entire team, and I would also send that to them so that there was no way that they could forget anything that we went over. Also, before the show actually started, either the morning of or either the day before, we would also do a walkthrough. And that would consist of an hour. Maybe we would not need the full hour, but you would be surprised at how important that is for everybody to know and to have questions they can go through. They can, go back and forth with each other so they can practice what they're going to say. It's very important to make sure that you're on time, you're early. And so that's how I would make sure that my team was prepared. And it really helped.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I didn't do early on, but I started adding it is essentially get agreement with the other departments who are present in the booth.
Right.
And basically my pitch was the show manager, whoever he or she was, everybody works for the show manager during show hours.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can't wander off because you have to go make a phone call. Mm-hmm. Right? Because again, we're spending $25,000 an hour. And if you're short staffed, what does that mean? You've got walk-offs.
Right.
People come to the booth and it's like, well, nobody here to talk to me. So I'll just keep on moving down the aisle.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was, things like that kind of helped the whole team pull together. And it takes a while, I think, to build that trust. Because, sales guys don't like to get told by marketing what they can and can't do. But, for these few hours during the day, I need you to be here. If you have to leave, just talk to us.
Right.
Tell me you're leaving and I'll find a substitute for your location.
Well, and I created a booth schedule. So I would work directly with the sales leader, whether it's the director, president, whoever it was. And that way they were in the know who was supposed to be walking the show and who was supposed to be in the booth. And we would even calculate the hours for lunch to make sure everybody had time to eat, because everyone has to eat, although myself would sometimes eat at like 3 p.m., but that's okay. We just wanted to make sure that everybody knew where they were supposed to be. And because walking the show will also, you'll be able to get a ton of leads in walking the show and you can plan ahead. But again, to what you're saying, Joe, it's very important that you have the adequate amount of staff in the booth. You don't want too many, and you definitely do not want too less. Yeah. Because if you have that one person, that could really create the ROI for you being at that show, and you don't have enough staff, or you don't have the sales or even the engineer on site, you might have just lost that sale and that opportunity.
So this is a story. I love little war stories. I'll tell you one from long ago and far away in my career. We were at the assembly show in Chicago, and we had 3 good days, and it's 3:45 on Thursday, and the whole show team is just yappa, joking and talking and not paying any attention. And this engineer walked down the aisle, took a look at some of the stuff, looked at the bunch of, sales and marketing people who were just jabbering away, and kept on walking. And the one sales guy from Cleveland saw that, and he jumped into the aisle and chased this guy down. and he said, I apologize. That was wrong behavior. That was rude. We're very interested, and if you will take the time, please come back to the booth with me, and I will walk you through our entire product line, any other questions you have. Within 15 months, that was the single largest customer of our company.
Wow.
And he was seconds away from being gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't like the idea of, one good order pays for the trade show, because that's not how marketing numbers work. But that was a heck of a lead.
But losing a big lead, should be a concern, right? I think
painful. Very painful.
Well, and the same holds true for leaving the booth early.
Yeah.
I've seen that numerous times too, where you have that one person who walked by the booth 5 minutes before the trade show is supposed to end, and that was the biggest customer a year later.
And nobody there.
And had we left early, or had the team left early, we would have lost that opportunity.
Yeah, it does happen, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually had the pleasure of being in one of Joe's presentations before, the night before a show with UR. And one thing I always appreciated about it, honestly, and not to disparage any other company I've worked for, but UR really did trade shows very professionally, and really made clear that your goal is to get leads, while you're here. And we would have a pretty substantial meeting the night before, and Joe would go over booth etiquette, which is, not just how you're dressed, and how to use the badge scanning software, but how you should conduct yourself in a booth. But ever since I've had that presentation, I'll walk through trade shows and see the bad booth behavior that he described. I'm like, oh, Joe would have a heart attack if he saw this booth right now.
Jennifer and I are going to
nobody in the booth. Just they set up a bowl of candy and some flyers and took off.
Yeah. So we're gonna act out bad booth behavior.
All right. Yes.
Right. So you're standing on the very edge of the booth.
Yeah.
In the aisle.
Oh yeah. That's always a good one.
Wait,
that's very open for conversation, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the face and the phone.
Or you're talking to your colleagues.
I was going to say, there were three people in a circle talking to each other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
people, companies think that that's great to have their staff all in the booth, but really that intimidates attendees from wanting to come into the booth. I've seen that numerous times where you have 12 individuals in a 20 by 20 booth from the company, and where are the attendees going to stand? I mean, how are they going to be able to look at the demos? How are they going to have a conversation with anyone if the entire staff from that company is talking amongst themselves? It's just not possible. And it intimidates them.
It does. And in fact, I can't take credit for this one. This was a trade show manager who I worked with for years, a woman named Jen Ramsey. And she put together this model that basically said there's 3 tiers of show attendees. There's the people that stay in the aisle because they don't want to commit, but they would like to look into the booth and see what's there, right? There's the people that would penetrate the booth one demo deep because they saw something that interested them. And then there were the people that went to the very center of the booth because they wanted to talk to engineering. They wanted to talk to more technical people because they were serious about their projects. And you could watch that behavior. And as you said, if you've got 10 people lined up on the periphery, nobody wants to come in.
Yeah. They feel like they're going to be accosted by sales or marketing kind of messaging or lead qualifying or something immediately, or at least that's my kind of thought.
Yeah, it's true.
And that I'm not going to get room for what I want to do in there potentially. But I wonder, so if you are going to have a lot of people, do you make sure then to create a good schedule where some of those people are going to be walking the floor in a targeted fashion and rotate people out doing that, so that you have you make use of the presence of all these people, but they're not always crowded in your booth?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then secondly, do you want everyone to dress like it's very clear that they work in your booth? Do you do a uniform, or do you let people kind of wear different things so that maybe when there are more people in the booth, it doesn't immediately look like there's just a sea of people, an army ready to sell you like you're walking into a car lot? right? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important to have either all the same colors. So, if your color is turquoise, to have a turquoise shirt or something that can represent that color. And I think it's important too that people are kind of uniformed because it looks really good in pictures. And I will say, after every single trade show, marketing, you have to send an email to follow up. That should be the first line of contact, unless it's an extremely hot lead, and then that salesperson needs to follow up with them immediately. But the first line of contact after a trade show should be an email to thank them from stopping by. And with that, it's always good to have a picture because sometimes people forget, oh my God, who was that I spoke with? So if you have that group picture that shows everybody in line at that booth, it kind of resonates like, oh, that's the individual I spoke with.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Absolutely. I like that.
So this is the first year I've been asked to wear specific things, the colors, right? Our CEO wants everybody dressed in black. Particularly on the Monday, we're going to take all those pictures and stuff like that with everybody in the booth. So that makes a lot of sense. I think also, like you said, so the booth visit or a trade show visit is one of the, average around 12 touches, right? Before a prospect really kind of remembers you or may reach out to you, right? Or before they really get into the sales funnel.
First time you get scanned into HubSpot.
The number is somewhere around there. I bet that this encounter kind of counts as more touches if you do it well versus if you do it badly, it's really only one touch in a vacuum, right? Because if you do it well, you pre-market, you made a touch with them thinking, oh, I'm going to stop by that booth and I'm going to see either this person or this demo or try to solve this particular pain point that I have, right? And maybe if you do it well, you get more touches before the show. You watch a pre-show webinar or you download a white paper in preparation for going to the booth to talk about it with someone. Right. Then you go to the booth and you meet someone. And that may be 1 to 2 touches as well. If you talk with a frontline person that introduces you to a salesperson or to an engineer, that's pretty much like 2 touches if you got introduced to another person. Right. I think that adds to that mental, okay, I know more people. I'm getting to know this company more. And then that reinforcement of the thank you for visiting, and maybe there's the person I met, like in the photo. I bet that counts way more as a 3rd or 4th or 5th touch than a generic, hey, thanks for stopping by our booth. Here's every brochure we ever made. And, thanks. You're welcome to our funnel now. Right? To me, I kind of dread the trade show follow-up deluge that happens after trade shows.
Yeah.
Because like every booth I stop by, you tend to just get these very generic, like, here's everything we do and everything that you should know about us. And I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. And let me now unsubscribe to like 10 more email lists.
Well, and in the thank you email, you should also just hit maybe 3 bullets as to what was in the show or what was in your booth. And that way it kind of resonates also with what they may have seen or what they may have discussed. I mean, if you have 27 items in your booth, good luck. But if you have just, a few things that you can just speak upon, that is really good to put in the email. And that way it's not just a very blasé type of email. You're sending it as a targeted kind of email because you yourself from the company, you want them to call you back or email you back or want to find more information. And I can't count the number of times that I've been the one that sent the email through an email service provider, and I would receive direct emails back to my email saying, hey, I saw you. Thank you so much. This really meant a lot. Now I know how I can follow up.
Cool.
Well, I think that's
sometimes
also
they lose business cards or they talk to so many people and they just forget. So having that first touch after the trade show is really important, but making it a targeted type of email is even more important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe? And if you can capture, in that conversation in the booth on your scanner, you can easily capture industry and application, right? Jen, what brought you here to the show? Oh, you're a welding engineer. Got it. Now you're having a brief discussion about your application. So Jen is a welding engineer at a fab shop, and this is the application. Doesn't have to be deep, but like you said, now you can tailor that follow-up email right? Here's the latest from our welding offering. Here's the new welding product that we introduced at the show. And that gets a whole lot better open rate and traction.
Yeah.
You can see it in the numbers.
Are there any other tips that you have, Joe, on trade show follow-up that you'd like to add?
No, I think to me that's very market and company specific. I think Jennifer's spot on. You've got to get that email out. The sooner the better. Because if you got a 3 or 4 day show, the deluge starts on day 4 or 5 or 6.
Right.
But if you can take day 1 leads and respond to them the evening of day 1 or the morning of day 2, that customer's getting your follow-up while they're still on the show floor.
Yeah.
And in many cases, we've seen that turn into a follow-up visit.
They came back to the booth.
Yeah.
Yep. They brought their president, or they brought another decision maker who had not been there the day before, but had flown in, and now he's there and he wants to speak to someone because they're ready to make a move soon. So having that follow-up immediately is very important.
But building a back office is difficult on a good day in your home office, right, at your company. Building a back office in the back room of a show floor is even more demanding.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a small booth that doesn't have a back office, and you can't be on your computer in the booth. That's a no-no.
Right.
Be staring at your screen instead of at people. There
are alternatives depending on how small the small is, but a lot of companies actually rent a separate room.
Yeah. And
that's
you do it in your hotel room at the end of the day, right? Like obviously it's not an excuse not to do it just because you don't have space in your booth to be doing it. Do you always recommend that people go for the lead scanning system that's offered by the trade show, even though I feel like it's outrageously expensive?
No, I recommend that you build one of your own.
Okay.
You tailor the questions for your industry, your market.
Yeah.
And then all you have to do is buy the API from the show.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know, what are they, Jennifer? Like $800 or $1,000 instead of $10,000 or $5,000?
Yeah, I mean, 7 years ago they were $1,000. I would imagine they're probably like $2,000, but still, it's going to be better. It's going to benefit you more because you have control. You have the ability to put whatever lead qualifying questions you want, and you can conform that type of lead form differently than you can renting at the show.
Yeah.
But if you're new to the exhibit and you're new to being at the convention center, I would say to rent it, because that way it's just easier on you, but do not rent the device. Use an iPad, because you won't be able to put your lead qualifying questions into those devices like you can an iPad where you rent the app.
Okay.
But with each app, you have to understand that only allows you per one email. So one email will be designated for that app. So you can't have 10 people using that particular app.
Yeah. So you pay licensing per user, basically. So you can decide how big is your booth, how many people are going to do lead intake.
Right.
Correct.
I mean, you could have 10 apps for your small booth, but that doesn't make any sense. You want to kind of limit it. But the show is usually good about creating a package deal earlier on. Now, later, if you get it the last minute, you probably won't get that. But earlier on, it won't be a very high cost compared to when you rent it at the show. But I would say, if you can get the API integration, that's obviously going to be your best because you have control.
Yep. Agreed. Totally.
Do you find that if you exhibit at the same show year after year, that if you built out that integration, you can pretty much use that going forward? Or do these things change from year to year or depending on the location?
You have to buy the API each year, but I mean, you have the ability to use it again because you have that form already built.
Yeah.
Yeah. You may add a new product into it. You may add a new service into it, but the fundamentals are the same.
Okay. So it'd be a good investment if you plan on continuing to go to a trade show to build out this process for yourself and then use the API. Sounds like it would be more cost effective in the long run and give you better results that are more tailored to your.
But not every show will offer that API. So you do have to do that as well. Yeah.
There's so much that goes into this. It's crazy. And
every show is different. Every show is different. Everybody has their own rules for each show.
Yep.
I know we're jumping around a little bit, but Joe, I want to make sure that we adequately cover trade show etiquette, or do you have any more things that you want to address before we run out of time here? Because I feel like that was one of the main topics that we did want to address, and I went into a whole lot of other areas. But
no, I think so. To me, there's like 3 or 4 that are key. One is body language. You have to watch how you're standing, what you're doing with your arms, and what you're doing with your hands. And again, that's not Joe Campbell speak. This is really from definitive studies by psychologists and psychoanalysts who have actually looked at how, relationships form. And when first meeting somebody, what are your first reactions based on their physical presence and, their body language? So body language is one. Second thing is, I don't tell people what an opening line ought to be. The only thing I tell them, you cannot go up to a prospect in the booth and say, do you have any questions?
Okay.
Because the answer is no.
Yeah.
And the conversation is over.
Yeah.
Right. So what I challenge them to do is come up with a couple opening questions that you might have that will engage them in conversation. No yes or no answers. Right, but get some kind of engagement with the prospect, and now you're in a conversation.
Yeah.
Once the conversation started, you can do a lot with it. The third point is, especially if you're working for a big company at a big show, particularly a publicly traded company, the entire show staff has to be trained in what that means. Right?
PR.
Because not PR. Although that's another topic, but this is the financial analysts and financial specialists who are roaming the show floor, and what they're looking for is data points to project how your company is going to perform or how you think your competitor is going to perform. Right. So again, the training for the show team is, you don't answer those questions. Mm-hmm. You pass them over to somebody on the senior team, right? The executive team. Or if, in some cases, you pass them over to the head of investor relations, who will probably be at the show for that reason.
Okay.
Same with the press.
Yeah.
Right. I tell salesmen, it's like, it's not that I don't want you to talk to the press, but you got to know how to talk to the press.
Right.
Right. And so, like you said, you're working with Michael DeGrace. This guy's he's been phenomenal. I loved working with him because he learned it so quickly. And then finally, the last piece is competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's public space. Competitors can come into your booth.
Mm-hmm.
What I tell our show team, and I hold the other team accountable to it, is never get between a customer and a salesperson in a conversation. Right? If somebody from company XYZ comes into my booth, don't ever interrupt my conversation with a customer. That's bad behavior, completely bad behavior. Don't touch anything. Don't be close enough to even think you're going to touch it or might bump into it. And the sad thing is, there are people who try to sabotage demos. I hate to say it, but it's true, right? Especially in the cobot world. Courtney, how many times do we see somebody walk up to a live demo and
just grab it
and just slap it to stop it, not to prove anything? They're not in a conversation. They're just
just because they can
causing trouble. So those are those last little behavioral things that I think make a difference, particularly at a big show.
Yeah, and that's something that, and again, I've been part of, I guess, slightly bigger show experiences, but most of the time I've been in like the small booth where there's probably less of this going on because there's less competition trying to scope out somebody that has a small 10 by 10 beginner booth. We're not public companies. So a lot of this is kind of new to me. But then again, I've also been part of a fairly big, it was still a private company, but a fairly big booth situation where we had a big investment. We had engineers there, we had salespeople there, and we didn't have this type of training. And I honestly question what we were doing there, other than I think in that case, it was a lot of, well, if we don't show up to the show with the same force that we normally do, people will think something is wrong. And so you kind of just go out of this maintenance mode of, well, we see all our major customers and, oh, people just expect to see us there. But they're not necessarily thinking of it as a brand new customer acquisition ROI, totally. Situation. And
I want to touch on something, Joe, you said earlier about the 3 tiers. One thing that I used to tell my team was if you see somebody standing in the aisle, don't ignore them. Just say hello. Yeah. Just acknowledge them. I mean, you don't have to go and have a whole conversation, but acknowledge them. Because I can't count the number of times that just acknowledging someone has actually made them want to come and talk to somebody at the booth. And I've seen it where a team has not acknowledged people and people get upset. The attendees will get upset and they just walk off and they will not forget that.
Yeah.
So never ignore anybody who's just standing around. If they're looking at your booth or passing by, just acknowledge them, say hello. How's you doing? Anything at all. You like your pants, like your shoes, whatever it is, just acknowledge them because it makes a huge difference.
That's a really good point. I found once you make eye contact and kind of smile and get a word in, people will usually hear you out, or they'll tell you what they're there for or why they don't want to stop in your booth or, whatever it might be, right?
Right.
Yeah. You won't find out unless you try.
And make a joke. If they say, I don't want to stop by your booth, and say, okay, well, see ya. Yeah. Make them laugh. Like, do something like, oh, well, go get some coffee down the other booth because we don't have any. You know, find something to make it humorous because, the days are long. I mean, your feet are probably going to hurt. And that's another thing. Do not wear new shoes. If you are going to the trade show for the first time, do not wear new shoes.
That's a good point. I'm going to get I need to wear a certain color on Monday. And so I normally wear like tan shoes. And I have an old pair of black trade show boots. And I have like 4 new black pairs of boots. And I'm going to get my old ones repaired so that I can make sure I wear the old ones.
Yeah, or just start breaking the new ones in now.
Yeah. That would be a whole nother conversation about the flooring, right? Make sure. Hopefully you're one of the lucky ones that gets the padded carpet. That stuff adds up over time. But looks like we are on time. I do want to try to address, we got one question from the audience earlier. Sorry, Andy, that I didn't catch this until now, but maybe we can help make some sense of this. Lead generation is the primary goal of exhibiting at a trade show. What % do you assign for brand building, closing deals, cost effectiveness of a second or third meeting with the prospect, or any other goals? That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for my case, we've actually put together a model that puts a value on those secondary and tertiary activities.
Okay.
Nice.
I mean, so for example, you do a briefing for the trade press. But you don't have to do it at a show, but if you did it someplace else, it cost you a couple of $1,000s.
Yeah.
Right. So you do it at a show, you attach some value to it. They all have value. You just have to figure out what your formula is and how you value it. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the qualified leads, whether it's MQL or SQL, that pays the freight for the show. Everything else is a nice to have.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So in our closing fashion, I'm going to ask you, Jennifer, first, and then Joe. Can you tell us, is there anything important that you want to share that we missed or that I didn't ask? And then B, tell people where they can follow you, how they can get in touch with you at Renaissance Marketing if they want your help, your services, more advice, and I guess what do you specialize in and what should people come to you for?
So I recently started my own company called Renaissance Marketing. Yeah.
Yes, congratulations.
I hold over 10 years experience in orchestrating and executing successful trade shows and corporate events. So with that, I would say if you need help strategically planning, managing, and executing your trade show, exhibit, and or your corporate event, let me know. I'd be happy to sit down with you. It's a free consultation, but you can find everything on my website at renaissancemarketing.com, and that's spelled marketing without the A. So mrktg.com.
All right. Nice. Thank you, Jennifer. And then I assume people can also connect with and follow you here on LinkedIn, right?
Absolutely. I'm very active on LinkedIn.
And Jennifer is OT SCADACon's official event planner. So we're very excited to have her services.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Excellent.
All right, and Joe, same to you.
Well, I'm in a slightly different point of life, so I am not actively trying to fill my coffers with new clients, but I'll be happy to answer any questions for anybody. If it's a quick answer, it's no problem. If it's bigger than that, I might direct you to Jennifer or somebody else who might have more capacity.
Yeah.
Best way to reach me is through LinkedIn. That's steady and it's a very easy outreach. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys. I really appreciated this conversation. I'm going to throw up here as well just a quick message from Michael, who is going to be at the Brew Expo in Indianapolis next week, and he will be attending Automate as well. But if you happen to be in Indy and are interested in brewing, which I don't know, a lot of my industry friends like beer, brewery automation is always fun. My very first factory tour was of a Coors brewery and canning facility down in Mexico. It made me very interested in those very fast production lines and the sensors and things. And so, yeah, please go visit Michael and Mass Technologies at the Brew Expo in Indianapolis next week. And for the rest of you, hopefully you're going to be attending Automate. If you're in that part of the country, there's plenty of shows coming out around and up for later this year as well, which we will continue to try to be a part of and report on here at Automation Ladies. But if you ever see us at shows, also just a quick shout out. This has been an interesting experience for us being at trade shows now that some people that follow the show know who we are, and we may not know who you are. We may be connected on LinkedIn, but somebody's picture on LinkedIn and you in real life, it doesn't always click for me right away who you are. So we absolutely want to meet you. We would love to talk to you. You can find me most of the time at the WinTech booth at Automate, which is number 6732. And you'll also find us doing some interviews in the Automate Live Theater. But if you find us and you want to talk to us, don't be shy. Just come on up, say who you are. I would really appreciate hey, my name is this, and we're connected on LinkedIn if we are, or because once you get to know a volume of people this big and, you meet a lot of people very short times at trade shows sometimes, more context is always better so that I don't look like an idiot forgetting who you are or your name. But if I ever come across as too busy or too important to talk to you, please know that is just my lack of training and trade show etiquette, not my demeanor. I actually would love to meet you. I would love to talk to you for any reason, whether that's, you're interested in HMIs or you listen to the show or you have some ideas of how we could collaborate or you want to tell us about your cool thing that you're doing. Please do. We want to talk to you. Don't feel like you're being rude or that you need to wait for us to, be ready to talk to you. I've heard from a few people after shows like, oh, I saw you, but you look too busy. I didn't want to interrupt. That's
trade show life. Just interrupt.
Yeah. Just jump on in there. We want you to. Don't be afraid. And I hope to meet you at Automate in a few weeks. And thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm going to play a little video here for Automate at the end, and then we will be signing off. So let me throw up this little thing, and we'll see you next time.